matter is this: we're a group of people doing our best to love God and love those around us. One of the ways we express this love is through worship, because our God is truly amazing. He created everything, great and small, and His love for us is incredible, powerful, and completely unconditional. We also spend time looking into His Word, the Bible, and receive practical teaching to guide us along His path in our everyday lives. But it doesn't end when the service is over. Throughout the week, we gather in groups to serve, pray, reach out to our community, and sometimes just to hang out and have fun. Life is full of challenges, and none of us are perfect. But we believe that's one of the reasons God has brought us together. We're all here to help and support each other through each step of life's journey, because nobody should have to travel alone. So thanks for joining us today. No matter who you are, we want you to know you are welcome.
We've waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here, you're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the skies, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. We've waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the skies, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. We've waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the skies, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. We've waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the skies, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. We've waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the skies, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens. We want to see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens. We want to see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens. We want to see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens. We want to see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart and filling every part of our praise.
Yes, sir?
We've waited for this day. We're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens. We want to see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart.
I would strongly encourage you again just to read it. Ecclesiastes, again, more than most books, is a book that we're not familiar with. And hopefully over your life, you've learned that your mind just takes time to get into gear. And if you start putting in some thought about things, then you start to really think about things, and you're able to focus more on it here. So I know for myself that when I'm having to do something new at work, I have to read it and read it again, and then think about it, possibly talk about it. And over the course of a number of days, I get closer to figuring out what the real problem is and how to solve the problem. And then I do it, and then I'm like, oh, that was completely wrong. Now I really understand it better, so I can do it here. And it's just this iterative process back and forth. And Ecclesiastes is a lot like that because it's just so different from what we're used to. It's just not clear cut like Jesus saying, don't do this. Or, the Old Testament, do this, don't do this. Or these examples, these stories, it just seems a lot more confusing. And it's definitely a lot more mature for things here. Okay. Well then, if nobody else had any real questions, here we go. Open up to Ecclesiastes. So, in verse 1 it says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanities of vanities, says the preacher, vanities of vanities, all is vanity here. And then, of course, in chapter 12 and in verse 8, it says, vanities of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. And so I want you to realize that 1, 2, and 12, 8 enclose the book. With this theme of vanity. Now, I think I asked it last week, but we'll ask it again. Did anybody else's translation have a different word besides vanity? Meaningless. Okay. All right. So when you listen to the book being read, or when you've read it this week, and you see the word vanity, you see the word meaningless, what does that mean to you? How do you understand this? So if the book is about vanity, if everything is vanity, everything is meaningless, then how are we supposed to understand the book? Okay. Okay. Pointless. Worthless. Okay. Right. Anybody else? Dung? Dumb. Okay. That's definitely more appropriate than dung, but okay. Yes, ma'am. See, I did hear it right. Okay, cool. Okay. I heard dumb. Okay. Anybody else? Chasing after wind. Chasing. Okay. So, what does God want us to get from this book then? Okay? Okay, where our focus needs to be? Okay. Surely everybody else thought about it at least. So, I mean, well, Wendell? Okay. So, mhm. Okay. Is Marcia not feeling well? Oh. I told my wife I really look forward to her input here. So I was like, okay, she could be my go-to person here. But she's not. Take your time. I have nothing but time. After all is vanity. Okay. Okay, so we're not unique. So our experiences, not unique. Okay? Okay, anybody else? A good life is what? Okay. Good life not found on our circumstances here, in our circumstances. So good life. Not found our circumstances. Circumstances. All right. Okay, anybody else? I haven't heard anything from Anita's side, Sharon's side. You ladies don't want to contribute at all? Feel free to say something. Okay. Okay. I just like to pick on Sharon when I can. So. Okay. So let me write something up on the board here. The word meaningless, vanity, that's the Hebrew word hevel. We usually spell it with a B, but it's pronounced with a V, so it's hevel. And it is found like 70, where did I put that? 73 times. Okay? So 73 times in the Old Testament. And so we'll just put a little line right here. Only 3 times does it have its material meaning, meaning of vapor, breath, vapor, or wisp of air. It's not the most common word for breath. It's just one of the words they use for it here. So when we think about breath, I always think about the start of Genesis, and it's a different word that's used there. But only 3 times it's used in its literal sense. 70 times it's used in a metaphorical sense. And it's found 38 times, 38 times in Ecclesiastes, which is why we have a difficulty, because it's used in an obvious metaphorical sense, but what is the metaphor based on? So we have 4 possibilities. So give me a minute to try to write these up here. So we got, it can mean vanity. And when I say possibilities, what I mean is this is how the Bible used it. And all the other places it's found, it has one of these 4 meanings. Okay? So these are all valid meanings. It's just hard to tell what Solomon is meaning right here. Meaningless of things. So then we got a second meaning would be irrationality. 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 Senseless. Senseless. And absurdity. Absurdity. Third meaning is about transience. Transience. Temporariness. Temporariness. Fleeting. Ephemeral. And then the fourth meaning would be mystery, incomprehensible, incomprehensibility, comprehensibility, ungraspable, graspability, enigma. Okay. Whew. We'll spend time talking about this just because this is the key word. And how you understand Hevel determines how you're going to understand everything else. And if you understand it as it's just meaningless, well, then you're going to reach a certain interpretation of the majority of the book. For instance, one author that I know, he understands it meaning to meaningless. And so when he reads from 1 to, oh, yes, ma'am? So these are the four meanings found in the Bible, in the Old Testament. These are four meanings that are found, used someplace in the 70 times it's used here, okay? So, and that's what makes it so hard, is because each one of these are true meanings that we could see apply to the 38 times in Ecclesiastes. There's just no real clarity saying it obviously means this. So in the rest of the Old Testament, we can determine one of these four meanings based on the context and other words that are used that go with that same sort of family. We're like, oh, okay, I can see this here, and it makes sense. But Ecclesiastes as a whole is just unbelievably confusing, and everybody can argue each one of these depending on what their starting point is. So one author I know, he takes the idea of meaningless, and how he understands things is that from 1:2 to 12:7, he treats this discourse like Job's friends. So we know Job, in the book of Job, has this discussion about God, to God, about why he is suffering. And we already know why he's suffering. He's suffering because God mentioned something happenstance to Satan, and Satan decided to take it out on him to show God that Job really isn't as good as he says, which doesn't turn out right. And then Job is suffering. He lost all his family, lost all his friends, lost all kinds of things. And when his friends come to meet him, well, they suffer with him in silence for 7 days, but then after that, they've had enough of his suffering. And they want him to understand that you're suffering because of sin. And so they take a number of different tracks and points, and they say these things here. And what we should understand when we read the book of Job is that their friends, his friends' speeches, while they're inspired, which say this is what they said, that doesn't equate to this should be our philosophy of life. Just like when Satan said, throw yourself down, even the angels will take care of you. While that's true, that shouldn't be our way of life here. So if you take this as the primary meaning, then the majority of the book you treat like Job's friends' speeches. That's sort of good, sort of not good here. Well, one of the difficulties I have, and you want to understand that this is just me, so somebody else said, no, I agree with that. I'm like, okay, I'm happy to argue with you about what Paul means over in Romans and what Jesus meant in Matthew, but Ecclesiastes is just so challenging, and there's so many assumptions we have to make. I'm really not going to argue too much with you. It's like, okay, that makes sense there. One of the problems I have with this is that I'm not sure why God would give us a whole book to where, other than 1:1 and then 12, 9 through 12, that's the only good part of it. Everything else we just ignore. It doesn't make sense to me as a whole that we should do it that way. So that's why I usually don't take this idea here. And then only some people take irrationality, senseless, absurdity, and we can definitely see some value in that, because it definitely seems like life is absurd sometimes. That you do all the right things, and it just seems like if you didn't believe in God, well, it's just like the universe is having you as a cosmic joke. All these bad things are happening to you. Why? It just is pointless, it's absurd, it's of no value. And again, that's why some people take this. So these two understandings sort of go together, and then these two understandings sort of go together here. These people right here, they take a pessimistic view of the book. Yeah. Let me see here. I wrote that down somewhere. Pessimistic. Okay, great. Let me see here. I got like notes all over the place here. It's just. Did I write? Thanks, here. So, I am, what? Okay. And then these two people, and by group, I mean groups, they take an optimistic, mystic. Oh, it should be an M. Okay, mystic. Optimistic view of it here. And they see things more in a positive sense. So I don't know if you noticed that at least 6 times there are 6 sections in Ecclesiastes where the author makes a point of enjoy life. You should be happy. Take what pleasures you can, because all these other things are true. So they're called carpe diem days, carpe diem, seize the day sort of passages here. You know, take advantage of what you can while you can. And one understanding is that Hevel is talking about the transience of life, temporariness of it, it's fleeting. So when vanities of vanities, he's just trying to say that life is just fleeting. And all of us can really sort of attest to that, because we're like, oh, I'm now 60. Oh, I'm 70? Wow. My, how time flies. Oh, it's another birthday. Oh, it's another this. And it just, time rolls on so fast. And we might be able to remember when we were kids and how long it took to get to a summer and how long it took to get to this point in our life. And then it just seems like everything goes faster and faster and faster and faster. And it's just sort of fleeting. It's like, oh, wow, I remember just yesterday when we first got married. Oh, I remember when we had this, or I remember when this. And it's just like that. And so when Solomon says vanities of vanities, he's just talking about that life is temporary, life is fleeting. And so here's some good things, here's some bad things. The difficulty with that is it doesn't really make sense of a lot of passages in Ecclesiastes. And we'll go with those case by case when we start studying it here. The fourth one would be mystery, incomprehensibility, ungraspableness, or enigma. And that's what I would choose to translate it as, enigma. So it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just something we don't understand. Christianity, when you're first a Christian, you learn, here's some right things, here's some wrong things. Yes, sir? Good. One of the things we want to realize about Ecclesiastes is it operates under the assumption that God is active in this world. And the thing that puzzled Job's friends, and they couldn't wrap their mind around, is the idea that Job, a righteous man, could suffer. Because as far as they understood revelation from God, as far as they understood the world, if you were righteous, good things happen to you. If bad things happen to you, reverse engineer that, you must be unrighteous. And that's all they could see. But in the church, we have a fuller revelation, and we should understand that things are never as black and white as we see that here, as we can look at the life of Paul. So he was a wicked man, which is only in a certain sense was he wicked. And he tried to destroy the church, and then Jesus saved him, and then he suffered after that. And he suffered endlessly after that. He should have died a half dozen times. You know, and really, if we made a life of Paul like an action flick, we'd walk away from the theater saying, that's just so fake. That would never happen in real life. Okay? He should have been dead, 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 dead. It's like the guy that all of a sudden weaves through all the bullets that are hailing past him and somehow makes it with no wounds whatsoever here. Not real at all. But we should understand that if God's working in our lives, we don't understand what God is doing. Only sometimes we understand what God is doing. And that's the frustrating thing with our Christian walk, is that God says, trust me. Yes, sir? Well, a mystery, incomprehensibility, ungraspable. Enigma means something that you just don't really understand. It's different from meaningless because enigma doesn't imply that it has no value. It just implies that it's not something you can comprehend. It doesn't mean that it has no point. It just means that you're not able to understand that point. And so we understand that to a certain extent inasmuch as when we've raised children, we can see what they're trying to say, but they don't really understand things as they truly are, and they may hear our words and parrot them back, but as far as they're concerned, it's just an enigma, it's incomprehensibility, it's just parent talk, it's just gibberish. You know, it's not till they get old enough that all of a sudden understanding clicks with them. They're like, oh, I can understand. This is what you really meant. And Ecclesiastes is a lot like that, because all is enigma, not all is meaningless. All is incomprehensibility, all is ungraspability, all is mystery here. And when you read the book, well, what do you see? Well, you see that work isn't good. Well, then you see work is good. You see that it's stupid, it's folly to be wise. But then you should be wise. You see that if you live a righteous life, good things happen to you. You see if you live a righteous life, bad things happen to you. You see if you live a sinful life, good things happen to you. Sinful life, bad things happen to you. What's going on? And we would like things to be simple. And by simple, I mean this. We go A equals 1, B equals 2, A plus B equals 3. We can just understand that. That makes perfect sense to us. But of course, it's because we're adults. When people first learn algebra, as can be a test with your young people, it makes no sense to them at all. And they just can't grasp that. And I know that my frustration level would rise when I would explain it in other different ways, and they just wouldn't see it. I'm like, fine, this is just how you do it. Just accept it, this is true, and move on. Because they just couldn't comprehend it. But when they get older, all of a sudden it starts making sense. And Ecclesiastes is wanting us to realize that God is not somebody that we can just put in a box within our mind and say, we understand what he's going to do. We are doing a disservice when we say, God can't do this, God has to do this, God did this. We can certainly feel certain things, and we can certainly point to a passage in the Bible where God said, I did do this, but we don't understand. And when we do understand, we don't really understand because we're like Job's friends. It doesn't make sense. I thought you said here, God, that if I did these things would happen, but now you're saying here that if I do these things, only sometimes that happen. And it doesn't seem to have a rhyme or reason, at least as far as we can see. But we do know the Bible teaches that God is a God of order, and we can see that because the universe is very orderly. I mean, the more science progresses, the more they discover, the more order they discover. They don't discover things that are disorderly. They don't discover things that are just completely random. They just discover things they haven't figured out a pattern for yet. And enough time, and they do discover patterns, and it just amazes them about the universe. Well, it doesn't amaze us because we're like, well, this is just how amazing God is. He just created these things, and it's just taken us 1,000 years to figure this out, 1,000 years to do this, 1,000 years to do whatever here. Sharon? Yes, because when I was first a Christian, you're focusing on sin and righteousness. I need to stop doing these things. I need to get my life right, start doing these things here. And everybody in the church is telling you, when you do these things, life will be better. If you do these things, you're going to have a happy life. You'll have a happy marriage. You'll have all these things happen to you here. And to a certain extent, that's true, but only to a certain extent because there are just plenty of exceptions. As you get older, you're like, oh, why did bad things happen to this person here? Why was this bad thing happen to this person? I remember reading one professor, and he, when I worked in Dallas, he had brain cancer, and he was able to survive from it, but he was a Greek scholar, and it really sort of messed him up. So he started using more interns in his teaching ministry here. And he had one young intern that was just sharp as a whip, that was just absorbing all kinds of stuff, and as far as he could tell, was going to be a great blessing in the kingdom. And then like a year later, the kid died. You know, just some fluke accident. And it really did a number on the professor because he's like, you know, I thought God was going to do great things with him, and now he just sort of took him out, and now his influence is gone. So from that point of view, the professor is right. Now, of course, we could say, well, God has him for a bigger plan, which is true. God has a better understanding, which is true. The problem is we don't understand what that understanding is, and we can't make sense of that understanding because of our limited perspective. We don't see a situation where this bad thing, from our point of view, is going to result in some good thing for God's kingdom. So I can definitely understand where Solomon's coming from because he's lived his whole life and he did all these things, yay and nay. And what did it matter? Yes, sir? It is. You know, we should talk about that. That's an excellent point here. I had a book that's called Living Life Backwards here. And the author's point is that you should live life in light of the fact that you're going to die, in light of the fact that this is your goal. And you should live life knowing this is true, live backwards. We pretty much live life forwards saying, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to get a degree here. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to buy this car. I'm going to marry this woman. I'm going to stock up in my 401. I'm going to invest in this stock. And my ultimate goal is to be able to retire at this age and go do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and all these sort of things here. And we live our life forward. But, of course, Ecclesiastes says if you do that, well, it's just all meaningless. I mean, what does it matter? You know, what did it accomplish you that you worked so hard? What did it accomplish you? Let me see here. Let's look at chapter 4, I want to say. So he says over in chapter 4 and in verse 4, I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is a result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor. This too is vanity, striving after wind. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. One handful of rest is better than two fistfuls of labor and striving after wind. And then I looked again at vanity under the sun. There was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother, yet there was no end to all his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, and for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity and is a grievous task. So, that verse just talks about our workaholic society. You just work to work to work to work, and what did it accomplish? You end up dying. What any sort of value did you achieve in this world that we have here? If we live our life backwards, we're saying, okay, my goal is to have a life with God. And I know I'm going to die. If I'm going to die and I want to die in relationship with God, how should I live? How should I understand what I'm going through here? And that's where life becomes this ungraspability enigma, because I can't understand what I'm going through. Why is it that some people seem to have nothing bad happen to them? Why is it that some people, everything they touch just seems to turn to gold? I remember having one friend, and he was determined that God had decided he would never be rich. He said because it didn't matter what he invested in. And he knew lots of guys he was friends with, people that were financial investors, who seemed to have the Midas touch. But if he got in with them, it always tanked. It just never worked out. So he decided, God obviously does not want me to be rich. I need to let that go here. But we sort of think that my goal is to do these things here, and so why is God doing that? Why is God making this person rich and this person not rich? What is it about me that God sees that's going to stop me? And naturally our mind goes to, okay, if I'm rich, I'm probably going to sin, I'm probably going to fall away, I'm probably whatever here. And that's always a possibility. But it's just as likely that God doesn't want us to be rich for some other reason. And we just don't know what the reason is. But we want to know what the reason is. If you've had kids, they just want to know everything. They just want to know. Even when they don't understand it, they just want to know. And they're forever saying, why? Why? Which is why you eventually reach that point. Go ahead, Marcia. Yes. I don't know. Yeah, and it's hard to know. And even when we have what we consider good reasons, they may not be as good a reasons as we think here. And so Ecclesiastes wants us to really understand that we cannot truly understand where God is coming from. So I've said this in times past, but when I was younger, I studied a lot of philosophy and proofs for the existence of God. And there are a number of major concepts about how you prove God. And one of the philosophers was like, I've seen an iteration of this proof that I think finally meets my standard. He was a Christian philosopher. He believed in God, but he took his job seriously. And he's like, but it's so complicated that truly, I think there's only a few dozen people on earth that understand it. And he said, this is why I know that intelligence is not required to have a relationship with God. We are not saved by our intelligence. We are not saved by our riches, by our physicality, by our strength, by whatever it is we think we have. Instead, we're saved by our faith. Are we going to choose to trust God or not? And Ecclesiastes is all about, am I going to trust God? Because Solomon's saying, if everything is an enigma, if everything is just really not understandable, well, what are you going to do? What's the point of life? Which is why he ends it with saying what he does. So let's look over in chapter 12. So in verse 8, he says, vanities of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. And then in verse 9 it says, in addition to being a wise man, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, and he pondered and searched out and arranged many proverbs. The preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. The words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by the one shepherd. But beyond this, my son, be warned, The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. And so Solomon is saying that even though we can't understand what's going on in our life to the level we would like, here's what you really need to understand. You need to have this relationship with God. And that's what he means by fear God. So we most times see the word fear and we think scary movies. I'm afraid of this person. I'm fearful in this situation. And there is a certain sense in which we're supposed to be afraid of God because of what he can do to us and because of who we are. So you should think about Isaiah in chapter 6 when he stands before the throne of God and he sees God's holiness and he says, woe is me, I am undone. For I'm a man of unclean lips, I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips. So I'm a sinner, and I can really see God's righteousness now, and it really points out how sinful I am, and I know sinners die. So I'm going to die. Which is why seraphim come, take the coal from the altar, take away his sins, and then God offers up that commission, and Isaiah takes that here. So fearing God means that we should realize God is vastly different than us, and we are sinners, but it also means that we have this relationship with God because we want to be understood, want to be loved by him, want to have some sort of connection with him. The fool says in his heart, what? There is no God. Okay? The Christian should say in his heart that I want to fear God. I want to have this relationship with God. And so that's what Solomon says at the end, is that the people want to have a relationship with God, that's what they want to have. And if you trust God, then you trust God. And that's what makes life so hard, because we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and we have gotten used to listening to people younger than us have these problems that we have resolved and overcome, and it really does seem obvious to us, to almost an absurd level, you should do this. And it's sometimes difficult for us to remember when you're in your 20s how very challenging some of these decisions were and how you sweated for weeks or months over the decision to do this or to do that. And now we're like, well, it's obvious, you just do this. Because it seems to make obvious sense here. But it's only obvious because we have this whole lifetime of trusting God, and it's just obvious, trust God. And so Ecclesiastes wants us to get that in our head. So with Hevel, your translation is going to say meaningless or vanity or something like that here. Just understand it doesn't really mean meaningless. It doesn't mean that it's vain, of no purpose. Really, Solomon's idea is that it's just something we can't comprehend. And that should make sense to us, because we've talked about the Trinity before. We've talked about Jesus being God in the flesh. We talked about him creating the whole universe. And those are things that are beyond our comprehension. Honestly, we have a hard enough time comprehending ourselves. We can't hardly even understand the opposite gender. And we get to a point in our life where the younger generation is like, wow, I don't know where they're coming from. That's just so stupid. You know, what are they thinking? This is obviously not going to work. You know, and so we have a hard time understanding those things here. And we just need to accept that there's so much in our life we don't understand. So what are we going to do? Trust God. Questions? Any thoughts? Concerns? Yes, sir?
Keep seeing the expression, at least in the other part of it, under the sun. What does that refer to?
Oh, you know, I don't know if that was going to be my next thought, but that's a really good thought. So, anybody have any thoughts about under the sun and what it means? On the earth? Okay. You know, that is very good. So, everybody lives under the sun. There isn't a human who doesn't live under the sun. Under the sun would exclude sort of heavenly realm things because they're not under our sun. Now, they certainly could be. I don't know. The Bible doesn't talk a whole lot about angels and where they dwell and this, that, or whatever. We got a lot of movies to go off, but that doesn't actually work here. So Solomon says under the sun, he's talking about what all humanity experiences, whether they're saved or lost, young or old. All these things that I see, they happen under the sun. They happen in our universe, and this is what I have observed. And he just talks about the things that he has observed while living this life. And a lot of it is just crazy stuff. A lot of it is bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people.
Okay, I got a question. So last week, one of the points of Solomon wrote the book, he said you don't know, now you're saying Solomon wrote the story.
Wow. You know, I've gone back and forth in this talk saying, yes, saying both, because it doesn't matter to me. But we can talk about the authorship. I have it as point number 2 right here. So let's talk about that here. See, I anticipated you, man. You're not the enigma you think you are. Okay. What I said last week was that it is inspired. Inspired. And would somebody read 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17 for me out loud for the class? That's 2 verses worth?
All scripture is given by inspiration of God, that the man of God must be complete and thoroughly furnished thereof.
Yeah, but we elided the important part. Not the important part. We elided one of the important parts. Brandon, you got there now. Read it for us.
All scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work.
Okay, so what I wanted to emphasize is that Scripture is inspired and is profitable for teaching, reproof, correction, instruction. The man of God will be complete, mature. So, Ecclesiastes is profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for instruction. It is necessary that we have all this so that we can be a mature individual in the church here. So I fully believe that. Under the authorship here, we have 2 options. We have Solomon, and we have unknown. Unknown. There we go. One of the difficulties with the whole authorship thing is, you saw in my translation, it talked about the preacher. The words of the preacher, the son of David, King of Jerusalem, vanities of vanities, says the preacher, vanities, vanities, all is vanity. So whoever is writing this isn't the preacher, but the preacher is going to talk from 1:3 on through the end of the book, and then somebody else is going to say, here's the words of the preacher. You may see this word. Kohelet. You might see it as spelled Qoholeth. Koheleth. And that's the word, the Hebrew word for preacher. You might see it. Well, let me ask you, did your translation have something different? Teacher? Okay. So it's talking about somebody who addresses an assembly, talking about somebody who addresses a congregation. You know, that's why this one's taken preacher, but it could be teacher. It's just somebody along those lines here. So at least in this book, we have 2 different voices talking here. So then the authorship becomes a little more convoluted, because it seems to say that the voice of the person in verse 3 is not the voice of the person in verse 1. So if we say 1:3 on is Solomon talking about his experiences, well, then 1:1 most likely isn't Solomon. Now, of course, he could be using an affectation. He could be saying, I'm just talking about myself in third person, and then I talk myself in the first person. And that's a possibility. I don't have any real problem with that here. Wendell, you want to say something? Okay, so not to play devil's advocate too much, can you see how any of these might apply to somebody other than Solomon? So let's take the son of David first of all. Was there anybody else who... Okay, so we want to understand that every king in Israel was a son of David. Okay, so that's a possibility here. And wisdom... So Solomon was the wisest man in the Bible, and he did write Proverbs, and he did write Song of Songs. He did do all these things here. So he certainly is the best candidate for wisdom, but he's not the only person that comes across as wise in the Bible here. And given that his wisdom comes from God, God certainly could have given somebody else that wisdom. And then wealth, I don't know if you guys have ever had any experience with a person who is rich and powerful. Most people who are rich and powerful, humility is not part of their name. And they all think they are the richest, most powerful person. Now, we can see that play out in our society because we like to rank things all the time, and we like to compare things here. But in the ancient world, they didn't have Forbes' list of top billionaires or whatever here. They just had people who would write things down, and every king who left a record talked about how great and awesome they were, and how their kingdom ran with gold. And they had the most beautiful virgins ever conceived, and all their trees were just unbelievably fruitful. And their land was overflowing with goodness, overflowing with wealth. And we have lots of descriptions, not just from Israel, but from all the surrounding kingdoms like that here. So we could certainly see that somebody could talk about their wealth and think that they're wealthy. Though we know, at least where the Bible is concerned, that it seems like Solomon was by far the most wealthy king in Israel. So, like I said, I have no problem with Solomon being the author here. You should be aware of, like I said, difficulties here. So he says, let's see here, in verse 12. So in chapter 1 and verse 12, he says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. And I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under heaven. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has observed the wealth of wisdom and knowledge. And I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I realize that this is also striving after wind. Because in much wisdom there is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. So he talks about being king over Israel in Jerusalem. Okay, so we have Solomon here. Before that we have David. Before that we have Saul. Saul was not in Jerusalem. David was in Jerusalem. Solomon's in Jerusalem. So he certainly could be saying that I am greater than my father David and all that were in Jerusalem before me. He certainly could be saying that, and there's a certain level of sense that makes sense in. But if it's somebody later than Solomon, well, then it makes sense that he's saying, I'm greater than everybody else before that. But of course, Solomon would have been that, and so is he really saying he's greater than Solomon? I don't know. That's why, Mary Sue? Well, so I almost never spend much time talking about an authorship or dates or whatnot here, because in my opinion, it can affect some interpretation only when you get to a certain point here. For the most part, it doesn't really affect their interpretation here. So whether Solomon wrote it or whether somebody unknown wrote it, it doesn't matter, because it really is inspired. And so God gave it for us because he wanted us to learn something here. And again, that's why you'll hear me say Solomon, or you hear me say the author, or you hear me say Colette, or you hear me say preachers, just whatever came to my mind at that moment here. I'm not trying to step on anybody's feet about those sort of things. You know, if we want to talk about Hebrews, I'm happy to step on your feet and say Paul wrote it, and we can have a discussion here. But here, I'm not really trying to step on anybody's feet. You know, it's just, this is what I think, and I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to get up to heaven, and God says, well, Charles, it's obvious Solomon wrote it for I'm like, okay, great. I was wrong. I'll add it to the list of all other things I was wrong on. Okay, I'm happy to be in heaven and move on with life here. Yes, and if Solomon wrote it, then that is one of the things it's showing us, is that Solomon did come back, because Sharon sent me a text talking about, Solomon's wives led him astray. Because he was busy experiencing all the pleasure the world had to offer, and it led down a bad path, And it's good to know that he might come back, because that gives hope for all of us. And that is something that you do want to realize, is that we have a tendency to view God as a judge and not as a father. A judge is concerned about right from wrong, either in a very technical sense or in a very large sense. And it doesn't matter why you did something, it's just whether it's right or wrong. That's why court systems sometimes really frustrate us, because we're like, well, why did the judge do this? It's because his hands were tied and he had to render a verdict based on this rule of law. He couldn't take these things into consideration. And we think that God is about judging us, because we talk about the judgment, the last judgment, and he's just going to have this law right here, and we're going to have all these sins, and he's just have to send people to hell because they have these sins. Well, that's not the case. People are going to go to hell because they choose not to believe in God. People are going to go to hell because they choose not to have a relationship with God. People are going to go to hell because they choose to willfully deny God in some form or fashion. Now, when we view God as our Father, well, we realize that we make mistakes all the time. I mean, I got two of my children over there. I can't number how many times they have made mistakes, which done things that are wrong, that I've gotten upset with here, but they're still in my house because I still love them. I still like them. I still make jokes with them. I still have them do things. And if I can do that, because I am vastly imperfect, well, how much more can God do that? And I try to remind myself of that, because if I can love my child, and I am such a horrible sinner, and I'm such a massive contradiction, if I can do this, well then God, who's perfect, how much more and greater is his love? And so God isn't trying to send any of us to hell. He is, in fact, doing everything in his power, which is infinite, to get all of us to heaven. All we've got to do is trust him. And if we want to trust him, well, then we'll move forward with life and say, I don't understand this, but I trust you. And that's what needs to happen here. I'll leave one last thing here. I remember reading a story about a king. He was vastly overweight. And he needed to get down this huge cliff. I think it was like 1,000 feet, because there's a great battle happening down. He needed to be down because he was super smart, needed to direct the battle. And they couldn't really do anything. So one of the guys here made this elevator-like contraption, because there wasn't technology there, and he just go down here. And the king looked at this saying, this isn't going to hold my weight, because he was just a massive king. Took a lot of guys carrying him on his palliade. And so he said, look, bring me the guy who made this. And he's like, explain it to me. He explained it to him. The guy's like, I don't understand that at all. King's like, I don't understand that. So he's like, I trust you. I know you. Do you understand what he said? The guy's like, yeah, let me explain it to you. He's like, no, I don't need an explanation. I trust you. I'll do it. And that's what we need to do with God. I don't need to understand why God has done something. I trust him. He has his reasons. And even if he explained them to me, I probably still wouldn't understand them. I just trust that he has his reasons, and it's not random. I just need to trust him. And that's what Ecclesiastes ultimately will end up with, trusting God. Okay, I'm sorry we don't have any more time. I got people waiting in the hallways here. So read Ecclesiastes. We will definitely get farther than verse 1 next week.